drums come in and ramp you up towards the drop. But once it hits the drop, use this vertical composition.
All right, next question.
Alrighty, thank you, Subdarth. You really sparked some conversation there.
That's great.
Our next question comes from Jordan Ratanavong. And Jordan asks for advice on sequencing and arranging drops. How to come up with a good rhythmic flow of basses in a drop and the different types of flows we use.
I like that.
Drop sequencing. Let's go.
I would say one thing that's really helped me out is approaching it sort of like a vocalist or rapper would approach it, depending on how you look at it. And generally, when you're doing vocals, there's sort of 3 layers to things. You'll have your main, you'll have support vocals that are emphasizing certain, let's say, punch lines if it's in rap, or certain lines if you're singing. And then you'll have like ad-libs or harmonies or whatever. And so when it comes to phrasing, I like to approach my layers, if I'm doing layers, sort of as a vocal take. So you could have a rapidy rap song where it's just rapidy till the end, and it's just a single take, no ad-libs. Or you could have something more spacious, let's say something more like old like Southern style, where it's just vibes and it's riding out and there's a lot of ad-libs, a lot of space, a lot of reverbs and stuff. So view your basses the same way and treat it as a vocal sort of sequence, you could say. The same way when you're just, screwing around and thinking of that song in your head and you're like, whoa, like, if you want, record that shit down and get some sort of flow going, and it should feel natural to sing or hum or whatever. That rule of music does not go away if you're making crazy sound design, weird music noise. Like, get some sort of cadence, flow, or whatever, and then find ways to emphasize that. So if you're having trouble with that, I would see if you could draw parallels with like hip hop or pop or rock or any other more vocal driven music and try and sequence your stuff that way. And mud pies. Mud pies is the way. We've talked about mud pies. If you didn't start doing mud pies yesterday, then you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And I just did a session with a student the previous hour where we cooked up a whole drop in an hour just by focusing on the right things. Do you got your drums down? Do you got a sub? And do you got your mid basses? And do they all sound full and leveled properly? And once you have that, all I did in our project, I took 2 cymatics shots, just put one on the downbeat and put one through the whole rest of the phrase. And then I mud pie that shit. And then that gives me the variations that I may or may not need. And once I have 40, 50 chops of this audio that I resampled while I was tweaking all these crazy settings and using plugins like Looperator or D-Blue Glitch, which is free. These plugins are really amazing because they take care of stereo, they take care of pitch, they take care of sequencing, they take care of all these things, and they give you these really cool variations that you could then chop up and sequence yourself, or you could throw into a drum rack if you're in Ableton or some sort of like multi-pad sort of drum pad, VST, whatever thing. Maybe you have something in your DAW, you could find like Battery by Native Instruments, and you just throw those all on, and now you could play these crazy bass noises as if they were an instrument, and you don't have to think about it too hard. So don't get too lost with like sequencing your drops. Just generate a bunch of content and then make something that's singable and hummable. And really important point here, make that initial idea that you mud pie very simple and memorable. Don't cram in all the crazy shit here. This is the part that you could listen to on loop, and you basically will be listening to on loop and throwing just little embellishments in. So yeah, find that strong foundation and move forward from there.
That's super huge. Yeah, just to sprinkle on top of that, it's way easier to start with a simple idea and add bits of complexity as you go through drafts than it is to start with attempting an extremely complex idea and then trying to rein it in to being a coherent drop that people can remember.
Amen, Trap Jesus.
That's why I let you take this one, Tesco. I knew you're gonna have a good answer for this shit. You've got drop sequencing. You got that all nailed up in your head. You actually touched on the one thing that I was gonna say, which is just literally hit record on your computer mic or a mic on your desk and just like loop the drums and the sub if you have a sub or whatever, and just start like literally just saying like the dubstep phrase or whatever you're gonna do. So you literally hit record and then just boom, and you could literally just do that all day until you find a sequence that you're like, okay, that's tight. And then you just take and chop out that 8 bars of your dumb voice doing that dumb thing. And then you just like, okay, let me make a thing that goes, and then let me make a thing that goes, wah, 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 wah. And then like, you're off to the races. Most of the time, like you can kind of shortcut that a little bit if you're like just listening to what comes before it or listening to the drums, and you'll like kind of get an idea. Like you kind of hear that in your head a little bit, or at least I do when I'm making music. But if you don't, like that's always the easiest thing. Just like hit record and start doing that. Or if you have no ideas to do that and you have chords, take the bass line from those chords and put it in a patch that you like and just start mud pieing it, like you said, and find your favorite bits and then just chop in your favorite bits from the mud pie in the sequence of whatever the bass line was. And then there you go. The one other thing that I did want to touch on here is that kind of a beginner intermediate mistake to make when you're doing this is basically to take too many different sounds that you think are cool and you want to use them in your drop because you think they're cool, and individually they might be very cool. But if you have 8 different cool sounds that go next to each other, even if they're playing a rhythm that makes sense, if it's too all over the place with the textures and the vibes of all these different sounds, it's not going to make sense to the listener. It's going to feel like you painted 2 strokes with watercolor and then another with an oil brush, and then you started sketching with a pencil. That shit does not look like a complete...
Now bring on the spray paint.
Exactly. Use one medium, one canvas, and maybe 3 or 4 colors.
Exactly. And use shades. Use shades of those colors and use variations, and show me a blue in the context of an ocean, and then show me blue in the context of the sky. Show me what you know applied differently throughout your song. Don't just show me a bunch of shit. That's a huge mistake to make. And so 2 huge tips I want to give out here. And if you're not doing both of these, you're really shooting yourself in the foot. And they're not obvious by any means. They took me a while to figure out. Here's 2 things I'm going to say that you could take away right now and implement and immediately improve. 1, you should have, if you're practicing sequencing and drops, you should not be opening your project to a blank template. If you're practicing buildups, if you're practicing whatever the fuck, you should have everything up till that step in your DAW already done with a serum patch, with your favorite note slapped in the MIDI on a quarter note or whatever you like, already ready to go. So you hear that beautiful serum or massive, whatever you're using, in it patch with some drums and sub as soon as you start. You should also have tools in your library ready to go. Go to that Cymatics Ultimate Presets page and download all the shit you can find related to your genre. Go to YouTube, go to Reddit. You should have a big catalog of stuff to go through that you could just start generating content with. And then when you hop in, now you're not wasting half an hour on drums or getting lost in any details. This is huge for me because I can get super ADD with it and go in on drums. And I might have a breakthrough, but I didn't write something that day, and that was my intent. So by having that ready, within the first 2 minutes, I already have something loopable with my first bass patch going, and I'm already thinking about how I'm gonna mud pie it. 2, mud pies are king, man. don't go in with too high of expectations. The mouthing thing is great, and I definitely recommend it if you're trying to get more natural sequencing or break out of your comfort zone and come up with, you know, a bit more like playful rhythms and stuff like that. But the thing is, I feel pretty confident speaking for most people that most times in the studio, you don't know what you're going to write. And you're going to show up and you're going to let inspiration and chance tell you what you're going to write. And actually, a lot of writing isn't even you writing. It's you getting out of the way so that whatever the hell that is can write through you. And I know that's some like new age hippie belief or whatever you want to look at it, but I find it a helpful belief to move forward with. So going in with that, I kick open my DAW, I got my drums, I got my sup going. On my favorite note, I got my serum patch. I find a patch I like. Maybe I'll tweak that preset a bit. Maybe I'll just grab a cymatics one shot, whatever. And I'll get a very, very basic idea going. Mud pie it. That will give me all of the different rhythm changes and stereo changes and all the weird variations of this sound I couldn't even conceptualize if I meditated on it for 5 hours beforehand. Yeah. So when I hear those, I'm like, oh, holy shit, that triplety thing was cool. I don't know how I would have done that in Serum, but I have it now in audio. Let me just drag it over here into the vocal recording part where I went, wah, wah, wah. And now look at that. And so just go generate 40 to 50 little chops of that audio, which is just like 2-3 minutes of audio recording of mud pies. And once you have all those, you could categorize them by like, all right, this is like a one shot. This is like a reverse. This one is like a triplet stabby thing. This one is also a triplet stabby thing. Color code them, do your thing, whatever. And now you know what you're working with. Once you know what ingredients you got in the kitchen, once you know what Lego pieces you got, you can actually cook that dish. You can actually build that thing. But if you're missing a fucking connector with 4 dots on it and a little stick thing and a single Lego block, you're not going to build the castle.
Word up, man. Yeah, dude. Go for it.
In there. Okay, first of all, I remembered you mentioned some glitch plugin that's free or something.
D-Blue Glitch.
All right.
Number 1. Number 2 is paid. My personal favorite is Looperator.
Looperator.
Sponsor us, please.
Yeah, amen.
Give our listeners 20% off.
I have that note. Okay, the next thing that I wanted to include there is that mud pies, like, not to even just hammer home on these even more, but like
hammer it.
The painting with too many different styles metaphor that we use. Mud pies are so great for that because if you start with one sound playing a loop of things, rhythms and whatnot, and you just create this huge amalgamation of different sounds and different textures with all this processing, you're going to create like a bunch of varied things, like a bunch of very different sounding sounds from the same thing, but they're all going to feel like they were painted with the same paintbrush and the same palette of colors because they started from the same place. That's the biggest hack that I realize making like crazy, ridiculous, distorted bass music, when it just gets to be like too much and too crazy and it all kind of sounds like, like if you have a bunch of weird, crazy noises, but they all came from the same starting place, the listener is going to, you hear that, you feel that, like even if the waveforms are not even close to the same, there is a common thread in all of those that came from the starting place. And so you can use all of that stuff in that mud pie and know for a fact that it's going to work and feel cohesive. The other thing that you kind of mentioned on, but I want to also hammer home, is drop sequencing. One of the easiest things to do to think about, if you have a long sustained bass, put some short punchy stuff after it, and then maybe some medium length stuff, and then maybe a big swoopy circular sounding thing, and then another long sustained bass, and then maybe a different rhythm of short punchy stuff, and like vary the type of sound that's coming after one of another. So like if you just don't do all sustained stuff the whole thing.
Or do it, just don't do it every song. Do everything intentionally.
Right. And well, it's just easier to get something that I think sounds more pro, like.
I agree.
Like,
if you don't,
make it a bit varied with the style.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to touch on. You set me up perfectly there. Drops are about contrast, and like we said, there's a point of diminishing returns where there's too much contrast of like too many different types of textures and colors that you're painting with. But like we learned in the dojo from Mr. Ill Gates himself that there's two kinds of basic composition. There is horizontal composition and vertical composition. Horizontal composition is like a breakdown where you've got these long whole note sustained chords in a pad patch with a, it's just like a long sustained bass, and then it's just like slowly steps up or down, or up and back down these notes, and it doesn't really jump that far, and you kind of get this vibey back and forth, and then the drums come in and ramp you up towards the drop. But once it hits the drop, use this vertical composition where you are focused on contrast. Like I like to give people the rhythm example. When the rhythm drop hits, it goes womp, 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 right? And it's like you're getting this contrast. Like each of those are the exact same womp over and over, right? Maybe slight textural differences on the womps themselves, but it's been this horizontal thing that built up on this ramp, and then the drop is coming and it goes boom. It's the kick and the bass and the lead all hitting with this big whomp, and then silence or close to it, and that is a huge contrast. And then right when the snare hits, the sub and the lead come back and do another big whomp, and then it gives you space again. And that contrast between extremely loud and extremely quiet, also hitting on the downbeat, and then the second downbeat, the kick and the snare, all of a sudden, automatically, without any thought whatsoever, your head is just getting slammed into the rail involuntarily, and you go womp, 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 womp. Like, exactly when to headbang, and all of a sudden now you're in this vertical dance move without even thinking about it, just because of the way the producer set you up for that. Just brought you up a ramp. You know exactly when to start going ham. They say 1, 2, 3, go. Get your fucking hands up on a distorted microphone. And then you do that because of the way they set that up. And, similarly to like contrast in notes, horizontal composition usually gives you notes that are pretty close together. Da, 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 da. And then the vertical composition, you might be jumping whole octaves or, 7 semitones at a time, like boom, and it's like all of a sudden, just because the notes went low, high, low, all of a sudden, without thinking about it, I'm doing this.
I agree.
And then like Evan was saying, contrast between sustained lead and staccato lead. Then having that rhythmic symmetry, so when you come back to the top of the next loop, it's another sustained and then another staccato. The textures might change. You use different versions of each of these mud pies. But I know as the listener, it's long sustained thing, staccato thing, sustained thing, staccato thing. We do that 4 times, and then you have a turnaround, some sort of drum fill maybe, vocal chop, I don't know, and then we start over. And then the last thing I want to say is like, so now you've got your dope loop and you know what your pattern is, and you've established the vertical movement of the drop. Now, escalate. Don't blow every sound and every bit of everything you have when the drop hits. Because if you do that, you've got nowhere to go but down. It's a lot better to start with like kick, snare, sub, just one lead at a time, and then you're hitting that. Okay, cool. And then the second time the loop comes through, you add the upbeat hi-hats, and then you get a little more verticality. And then you add like the faster hi-hats for the second half of the drop. And for the fourth loop, you add in like a polyrhythm and a new percussion. And then it's like, so the percussion keeps escalating as it goes, and then drops back down to make a really dramatic change back to your breakdown. I like it.
What's up, humans? It's Luke, your friendly neighborhood trap Jesus. Thanks so much for watching the podcast, checking out our videos. We truly appreciate you. So, Rip Kenny, Tesco, and myself got you a gift. We made you a free sample pack. It's got basses, it's got FX, it's got crazy percussion and Foley sounds, and it's free. It's all yours. Just click the link in the description below. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe, hit that like button, and share this with your friends. We appreciate you. Peace out and peace among worlds.